On the 15th of May 2023, a teenage boy by the name of Wyatt posted a YouTube video showing off a discovery he had made whilst trespassing on private property. A hole in the ground beneath a tree containing a staircase leading to the darkest depths of the earth and uncovering a horrifying world that was never meant to be discovered. This is Kane Pixels' The Oldest View. We open with a static shot of a singular flower as a man walks up to it and kneels down. You'll notice that the man here is completely void of any colour, in contrast to the vibrant field as we cut to a mid-shot revealing the surrounding area. The lack of colour in this character may be telling us that he is dead or simply not the main focus of the story, however we are of course unsure of this. He then sits for a moment before picking the flower and smelling it. This first video plays out like a trailer, with a brief showcase of the environment before throwing us into the main story. That's why for the majority of these shots you won't be able to piece together what's going on, but when you look back at it later it will make a whole lot more sense. The man walks around a lot before sitting down on a log and pulling out a notebook that he begins to flick through, with the camera slowly panning up and fading to black. A craftsman marks pieces of cardboard before cutting them out and sticking them together with a hot glue gun, with designs of what appears to be a mask scattered across the table before the camera zooms out at the design once it had been partially created. The background music then begins to distort, eventually becoming inaudible as the video abruptly ends, followed by the second part of the series titled Beneath the Earth, where we are introduced to Wyatt. The beginning of part 2 plays out like a homemade vlog as our main character discusses something he uncovered within a large field a few miles out from public road. He drives as close as he can to the location and begins to walk the rest, filming the surrounding area on his approach. And after about an hour of walking he arrives at a tree before saying, "Yes, this is it." We then cut to Wyatt inside of the hole looking down at the seemingly never-ending staircase, mentioning how strange it is that all of the lights are on, before beginning to walk. And it takes a while before he reaches the bottom, recording roughly 5 minutes of his descent, with a few key things happening on his journey. At 4:52, Wyatt reaches a left turn in the staircase and sits there for a moment, likely debating whether or not to carry on before getting up and walking further. A minute later, he says that the area had become much colder before reaching the last light on the wall and descending into the darkness, reaching the bottom of the staircase at 8:45, where he is greeted by a wooden door. Opening the door, Wyatt nervously steps inside, inspecting the area and crawling under a broken gate. And once inside the next room, gentle music is heard emanating from somewhere unknown, amplifying the stress and tension felt in this already terrifying situation. And creeping toward the next gate, Wyatt takes a peek at what appears to be some kind of shopping centre. The video then ends, followed by the third part in the series, The Rolling Giant. We begin with a summary of the previous video given by Wyatt, explaining that he became really paranoid after reaching the bottom of the staircase, causing him to venture back towards the surface where he has remained until now, and clarifying that his feeling of paranoia came from his fear of potentially running into other people. Because of this, Wyatt set up a few trail cameras in the woods in the hope of potentially capturing human life around the area, however no evidence of any form of activity was found inside or outside of the staircase. And feeling a little bit safer, he heads back to discover more. Heading back down the staircase, Wyatt tries his best to keep quiet, still unsure of what he's getting himself into, and reaching the bottom, his faint speech turns to subtle whispers as he returns to the gate where the last video ended. Despite being terrified of the unknown, Wyatt is determined to get further than he did before, entering the next area that really is a large, desolate shopping centre with a lack of lighting and sound. And not knowing what could potentially happen while in there, Wyatt stays deadly silent, only ever talking to the camera when he discovers something, and the few things that he does come across are really important. At 11:06 he finds an advertisement for the Midtown Art Walk, an event that supposedly takes place on the third Saturday of each month at the Valley View Center in Dallas, Texas. And if you search up the website displayed on the poster, galleryatmidtown.com, you can uncover more information about the event. Gallery at Midtown represents established and emerging artists and welcomes the Dallas art community. A place for creative and innovative programming, the gallery provides a schedule of art-related opportunities allowing both the seasoned fine artists and the new talent to thrive. We host exhibitions year-round and collaborate with numerous institutions, galleries, art collectives, and non-profits. We maintain a dynamic calendar of art events, lectures, fairs, and classes. Conceived from a need to infuse our community with art and involve the public on a personal level, Gallery at Midtown has arisen from our rich cultural heritage of vibrant artist-led communities. We invite you to engage our vision by visiting our artist studio spaces, arts academy, artist residency program, and gallery space. With a little more digging, you can also find the exact advertisement as shown in the video, and although we can't be too sure on what all this means at the moment, we can keep it in mind for later. Then at 13:50, we see another poster about the Valley View Center. Wyatt doesn't seem to recognize what the Valley View Center is or what these posters are about, causing him to continue searching, to which he discovers another sign 4 minutes later that reads as follows. "We're back. Created by La Reunion TX artists and volunteers who care about West Dallas, the oversized puppets of Bridge-O-Rama's Parade of Giants nearly stole the show during the opening weekend of the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge. See them again, learn their stories." This is once again another advertisement that you can find online, and the parade that it mentions is actually a documented event. In March of 2012, the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge in Dallas, Texas was first opened to the public, and to celebrate, local artists hosted a parade on the bridge with a collection of giant puppets that rolled across the bridge on wheels. The puppets themselves represented historical figures from Texas, specifically those who had influenced the area of West Dallas. And the advertisement that Wyatt stumbles across states that the puppets will be on display once again in the Valley View Center. And continuing his search, he discovers something else.
That scared the shit out of me. What is this? Some kind of artwork. I don't like this thing. Oh, fuck.
In a state of shock, Wyatt realizes that a number of lights had turned on in the surrounding area and that music had begun playing much like it did the first time he reached the bottom of the staircase in the previous video. And moving closer to the light, we get our first good look at the shopping center. And as more lights begin to turn on, Wyatt becomes more afraid, and in a panic, walks back towards the staircase to leave. But upon arriving,
No. Fuck no. Come on. I really fucked up, guys.
with no other option, Wyatt turns back around to investigate further and to possibly find another way to escape. The music is scarily loud. Even though it's likely always played at this volume, being alone in a building that's designed to be used by hundreds of people at a time makes the environment seem so much louder than it usually would. You don't typically take much notice to the sound of people on a busy street or in a large area, as the ambience usually fades into background noise. But the second it's gone, you realize just how silent the world is when you're alone. I imagine some of you are watching this video in a pitch black room late at night, and you might feel fine and really cozy next to your screen, but if the music was to fade out and I was to stop talking, it suddenly becomes scary. But carrying on, Wyatt walks around looking for any other way to escape, learning that the original exits to the shopping centre were now blocked off by huge walls of stone, which makes sense given that the whole place is underground. He then continues, discovering plenty of new areas, and eventually hearing loud noises emanating from other parts of the building, but when attempting to investigate these sounds, it doesn't take long for him to find the source. Here, Wyatt bumps into the large sculpture he discovered earlier, which you may also recognise as one of the giant puppets showcased at the opening of the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge, and is now known as the Rolling Giant. The sculpture remains stationary when looked at, but whenever Wyatt turns away, it begins to move, much like a weeping angel.
Hey!
Eventually breaking its rules, the giant begins to chase Wyatt, showing no signs of stopping as he runs in fear, standing on an escalator where it cannot reach him, bringing the giant to a halt until it eventually leaves. And once the coast is clear, he makes a run for it, breaking down a wall and shutting himself inside of a room where he can hide, and for the first time in a few minutes, we return to the deadly silence of isolation. Wyatt eventually exits the hiding place and continues to look for more ways to escape, which is when he comes across this room, an area that for once isn't filled with nothing, but instead contains countless diagrams and documents, one of which showcases an emergency exit point within the shopping centre that is to be used if all primary routes become inaccessible. And reading the map, Wyatt sees this as his last chance, but heading back to the main area, something had changed. The shopping centre was now overgrown, with trees and grass growing through the building like it had been completely abandoned, and the song playing over the speakers had changed slightly as well, now sounding like a gentle voice was talking over the music, and knowing he was being followed, Wyatt tries desperately to remain hidden.
You fucking get me. You gotta fucking get me. Oh! Oh, shit. Oh, fuck.
In fear of falling, Wyatt tries desperately to cling to the wall as the giant watches from afar, and as we get closer, we see a staircase, much like the one he used to enter the building, a staircase that is just a step away. The fall marks the end of part 3 as we see Wyatt lying on the floor of the field as the giant watches him from afar, this time on the surface, and the video fades to black. Let's talk more about the giant. As mentioned before, all of the giant puppets made for the parade at the Margaret Hunt Hill Bridge represented influential figures from the Dallas area, and knowing this, we can begin to properly understand what the Rolling Giant is, as well as the meaning behind it. The man we see in the field in the first part of the series is Julien Reverchon, a French botanist born in 1856 who moved to Dallas at the age of 18, where he would begin identifying and cataloguing plant species within the area, eventually publishing establishing the flora of Dallas County in 1880, which provided a thorough documentation of the plant life in Texas, making him a very well-known botanist who was respected by the people of Dallas. And despite his death in 1905 at the age of 68, a huge tribute to his life would begin more than a century later when artist Kevin Obregon posted 2 photos to his Facebook page on the 31st of January 2012, marking the beginning of the construction of the Rolling Giant, which represented Julien Reverchon at the Giant Puppet Parade in March of the same year, as we discussed previously. But it wasn't the last time that this artwork in particular would be showcased to the public, as after the parade, the sculpture would be placed to stand forever inside the Valley View Mall. In case it wasn't clear already, the shopping centre seen within the series is a real location. After opening in August of 1973, the Valley View Centre became a great area for shoppers, with over 130 different shops spread across 2 floors. And in 2012, the Julien Reverchon sculpture would be placed into the building with plans to keep it there indefinitely. But unfortunately, the mall had been on the decline since 2005, and only 3 years after the Giant was created, the Valley View Centre would begin closing its doors, and slowly over time it would be demolished, with its demolition being completed in May of 2023, and the Giant remaining inside the building during the entire process, and eventually being demolished itself. The story of the Julien Reverchon puppet is one that's heavily explored in this one-off video titled Life of a Giant, posted after part 3 of the series, featuring a slideshow of images from before and after the Valley View Mall was abandoned, as the Giant, who was once loved by everyone in the area, slowly became more and more alone, isolated from the rest of the world, until it was eventually destroyed. The backstory of this sculpture could give its actions within the series a whole new meaning. It isn't trying to harm Wyatt when chasing him, it has been starved of attention ever since the mall was abandoned, and it wants to feel the things it used to once again. It's alive and it wants company, just like a human. But due to its artistically creepy look, it gets avoided, leading to far more pain than was ever intended. There is a lot more information on the Valley View Centre and the Reverchon sculpture that you can explore yourselves if you wish. However, we've covered enough of the basics to be able to move on, leading us to the most recent part in the series, Dispersal. As the video fades in, we see a large entrance that slowly comes into focus as Wyatt's scream from the previous video is heard somewhere in the muffled distance, followed by the loud creaking of a door, then showing the inside of this area that contains a familiar looking staircase at the end of a dark corridor, before being interrupted by a new scene that we aren't as familiar with. The footage that follows originates from a conference meeting held by the owners of the Valley View Mall as they plan to transform the abandoned area into Dallas Midtown, a plan that is still currently in process, with this meeting taking place in early 2023. We then appear back in the dark room before cutting to this shot, with light beaming down onto the face of the Rolling Giant, showing that after all of this time, it will finally re-emerge on the surface. This scene is then followed by a replay of the ending to part 3, with Wyatt attempting to reach the emergency exit. However, this time, instead of falling, he successfully reaches the staircase, and with the adrenaline still pumping, sprints up the mile-long staircase towards the top with no sign of slowing down, and after a fight to save his life, he re-emerges, cutting to a drone shot of Wyatt running back down the path and stumbling through the field, much like Julien Reverchon did in the first part of the series. And following Wyatt's escape, we are shown a message. Anatomically, modern humans have existed for approximately 300,000 years. Recorded history accounts for roughly 1.6% of this time. Wyatt then enters his car after leaving the field, with the camera slowly zooming out until he pulls out his phone to check for directions and noticing that he has no signal. And paying close attention, we can see him rotate the map 180 degrees to the left, implying that it was upside down. I've seen comments suggesting that this means Wyatt has entered an alternate timeline, but despite not having a clear answer on whether this theory is true, this small detail seems too specific to not mean something. We see a point of view shot of what appears to be the giant rolling down the road. However, it's only heavily implied as we are unable to see the giant from this point onwards. And the ending to this video marks the final part of the series as of now. This series as a whole is very unique compared to a lot of internet horror seen online. Rather than using cryptic messaging and interactive elements, The Oldest View sticks to a typical straightforward story, being much more in line with casual filmmaking. Of course, there are still some parts you need to wrap your head around, but that ultimately comes down to the viewer's own understanding of the meaning behind these videos. And although I still wish to discuss the theories surrounding this story as I usually do, think of these ideas less like their theories and more like their interpretations of the story. So without further delay, here are some things that are worth mentioning. In the first part of the series, Julien Reverchon is always depicted in black and white, while the world around him remains vibrant in colour, a decision that tells us more about the story than we may initially believe, as it is agreed upon by many that the Rolling Giant is the ghost of Julien. I believe the reason Julien is shown to the audience in this way is because he is long forgotten to the majority of the world despite the huge impact he had on Dallas when he was alive. It's been so long since he was around that the memory of him and his work has slowly faded over time until 2012, when the statue of Julien was first displayed to the world. For the first time in over 100 years, the life and work of this man was finally being appreciated again, as portrayed through this very large puppet, and Julien is henceforth displayed in black and white, telling us that his spirit is no longer with him, as it lives on through the Rolling Giant. His spirit is what controls the giant, allowing it to move freely through the Valley View Centre where it was left to rot during its closure. We also see Wyatt in black and white at the end of part 3, which leads me to believe that there is some sort of connection between Wyatt and Julien, which may explain why the giant chases him through the Valley View Centre. However, I cannot say for sure what that connection may be. It's also believed by some, as mentioned before, that once Wyatt returns to the surface, he has entered an alternate world or a mirrored world, as his GPS was upside down on his phone. And I can give a good explanation as to why this theory may be correct. Towards the end of Dispersal, we see Wyatt holding his left shoulder like he has injured himself, and in the previous part when running away from the giant, he collides with a wall after running too fast. The speed at which he was travelling would definitely result in enough force to cause an injury. However, we see clearly that he bumps into the wall on his right side, hitting his right shoulder, the opposite side to the shoulder we see injured in part 4. These clues could definitely hint to the fact that Wyatt has entered an alternate world. However, I'm not too convinced that this is the case. At the time of uploading this, Kane isn't currently working on any new content for this series, so it may take some time before our questions become answered, but as of right now, that mostly concludes The Oldest View. There are more theories that you can find online that go more into detail about other areas of the series if you're interested, but we'll leave it here for now. I hope you enjoyed this little explanation of the series and that you understand it a little better after watching it. And if you have any suggestions for internet horror videos that you'd like me to discuss next, then let me know in the comments section and discuss your own theories down there too. But until then, this has been Kane Pixels, The Oldest View. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you all later.